indication of leadership capacity. That of course there are going to be some people who are going to have roles and responsibilities that are different from others. I accept that. But it is going to be necessary over the course of particularly the next 7 months, as we go through the very difficult debate on the 10-year plan, to not be too exclusive. I too was concerned at the start of this term at what I thought was pretty rough treatment of Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Lee, people who come from quite different perspectives in life, but both of whom I respect very much. And there have been some other difficult conversations and debates we've had in relation to the roles and responsibilities of colleagues around this table. My plea to you, sir, is that whilst there is a need to get support, to get decisions across the line, that there is every attempt made to try and to reach out to build a consensus where possible. It's not always going to be possible, but to not use the committee structure and the way in which advice is framed in a way which leads to those divisions where the result is very, very close. And I can think of 4 votes in the past few weeks where the decision was probably not what people expected. And actually on 2 such occasions we suddenly had another vote to flip the decision. So in noting your recommendations, Your Worship, I simply say that the health and the effectiveness of the governing body is something that should be paramount in your thinking as in mine and everyone else's, and part of that is about trying to ensure that this is not an A team and a B team. This is the governing body, and whether people like or dislike colleagues, there will be a need to reach out to people that aren't necessarily going to be the first telephone number on the dial list. And I fully appreciate, Your Worship, just in closing, that I'm not always available when you try and call me as well. But Merry Christmas to you, and look forward to catching up with you in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. Maybe the Hamlet comparison was a little bit melodramatic. I haven't quite seen that sort of bloodshed around here.
Don't be for
Nor am I absolutely obvious that there are A and B teams. I just see councillors around this table vote in different ways and in different groupings. Every governing body and committee of the whole meeting that we have. The funny thing about council coming from a parliamentary life is that you don't have teams as such. You have people that vote according to their particular personally held views on topics. In terms of trying to be inclusive, I actually make a real effort to do that. I think, you know, when I talk to people about the nature of this place before I became mayor, they said, you know, well, the mayor's at level 27 and we're at level 26 and the two never seem to coincide. I make huge efforts in terms of invitations to social events that some of you can get to and some of you can't. I understand that. In terms of getting down and trying to talk to councillors when I can find them, in attending meetings to the maximum extent that I can, given my other responsibilities. So I don't think it would be really fair to say that I have not tried to talk with and get along with councillors around this table. Will you agree with everything that I do? No, that's the nature of life. That's the nature of being a human being. But I don't think I'm unfair. But I will make decisions where my judgment leads me to make those decisions, and you may not agree with those decisions from time to time. I simply accept that. That's the nature of our existence, and that's the nature of politics. But I have made a real effort to talk to a whole lot of you in person, in your offices, in my office, on the phone, at events. And I like to think that I can get along with just about every member around this table without any personal factor becoming involved in that. Political differences are natural. I try never to personalise them, and I'd encourage all members around this table to do likewise. Next comments. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Yeah, just to follow on from Councillor Newman, my moment was less a Hamlet moment and more an anti-nuclear moment, and that's just a reflection of past history in the peace movement, where we did things in particular ways that were generally fair and transparent, teamwork, you know, issues around confidence, inclusiveness. They're all things that I've been used to for quite a long time outside of council. So it's not the what, as far as I'm concerned, in respect of taking me off the deputy chairmanship of the regulatory committee. I'm not overly phased around that. It's actually the how things are done. And frankly, you know, advising me pretty much after the event is certainly not the way I do things, And similarly, the changes that I see being made to the committee that Councillor Casey chairs, in my opinion, and I'm a member of that committee and I was never advised about that, are also retrograde, not so much for myself but for the public of Auckland, for whom issues that are covered off in that committee of Councillor Casey, I think, are really important. And that's against a background where, for many members of the public, when they try to actually engage with committees through public input, find it incredibly difficult. The regulatory committee especially so, and some of the others. And I know that through direct experience in engagement with people out there in the community. So for me, it's of concern, it's a pattern. I wasn't put on the Weed Management Political Advisory Group. I wasn't even consulted around that, even though I actually led that strategy out in a previous term of council. And I was really incredulous about that. And it concerns me that I actually have to go to the mayor and ask him to go on something like that. And I actually don't propose to do that, Mr. Mayor, because you're the one that should be making things right, not me. And it's an issue around leadership as far as I'm concerned. And for me, this is just another disturbing aspect of leadership. So that's really all I want to say. And as far as going on the Civil Defence Committee is concerned, I was never asked about that. I'll evaluate that as I see fit, and I'll make my call around that. And I may engage with you around that at a later point, and similarly with other things that I may choose to be on or off.
Just on the latter point, Councillor, I invited you to become a member of that committee if you wished, and I gave you the reasons. You would have heard the reasons I left on the telephone for you. It's of course up to you whether you want to be on that committee or not, but I was inviting you, extending the invitation to you in an area that I thought may have been relevant to some of your interests. But you'll need to come back to me on that, whether you want to be on it or not. That's entirely your decision.
Sure. I think just a passing comment through you, Mr. Mayor. You're in a difficult, in a different situation to all of us, in the sense that you've got a whole department that can exercise communication with myself or another councillor. So I'm rather limited, but it's fairly easy for you to direct an officer to have an engagement with any of us, even if you're busy. And that didn't happen in this instance either, in advance of the event.
Thank you very much. Councillor Casey.
I'm just hoping that you've got the message. This is the third time I've made this speech. The first time was when you took the two councillors off the Auckland Transport Board. It's not the action, it was the way you did it. Then when you took the delegated responsibility for the World War I memorial away from colleague Mike Lee, again, you have the power to do that. You can actually do an awful lot. It's the way you're executing that power. That's the message you're getting from all of us here today, and from me again. Don't do it like this. This report wasn't written yesterday, Phil. This report would have been in process for the last 2 or 3 weeks. It might have been signed off yesterday, but you knew these decisions were coming. And to say that it was sufficient for you to call Wayne Walker to tell him you're removing him from a committee as deputy chair was just not good enough. And you're a year in office. That's the way they do things down there. Bump, you're gone. That's it. That's not the way we do things around here. All it breeds is disillusionment, disenfranchisement, and as my colleague Daniel just said, the A and the B team. If you're in the A team, you'll get treated well. If you're in the B team, you'll get a phone call the day before the governing body meeting. So I hope you're listening.
Yeah, I just remind you, Councillor, that the decision in regard to councillors serving on Auckland Transport and on the World War I Committee weren't made by me unilaterally. They were made by a majority of members around this table.
No, it was the lead up to it, Phil. We can have a...
I think I could have a long discussion,
keep ears open.
and
it's
Councillor
about the
Fletcher
way
will
you
understand
are doing
that
your business as mayor.
I went to extraordinary lengths to try to deal with that after consulting people
humiliating.
fully. You might not agree with the decision, Councillor.
It was no, the process was humiliating.
But
it's not about your decisions. It's about the way we get to them.
I can't help that, but I stand by the way in which I dealt with that matter. Councillor Lee.
I'm not going to add anything to the discussion, Mr Mayor, except to say, to ask you, to advise you to listen carefully to all the comments made by colleagues around the table today. They are well meant, and they are actually correct in my view, and that it's in your interest to listen to them and not dismiss them. In regard to Councillor Walker, what can I say? Was it a couple of days ago that you earnestly lobbied Councillor Walker to change his vote against his best judgment, but he did over the ACIL issue, and he did it out of loyalty to you, and gave you the benefit of the doubt. I suspect he'll regret it, but he has shown his loyalty, but it's not repaid. And I think you need to listen to the comments about your behaviour in here and reflect on them over the Christmas holidays, and I think we can have a new start in the new year.
Always keen to have a new start in the new year, but I think all councillors need to reflect on their behaviour, me included, in this place. The integrity we show, the honesty we exhibit in our discussions with our colleagues, the way that we treat our staff, and a whole lot of other issues. I think Christmas is a good time, Councillor, for reflection on those particular issues. I have no further speakers, so I shall put the... Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chairman. I took questions before.
Yep, no, I recognise I haven't had you speaking yet on it.
I think a lot's been said here today, and I'm not going to... I don't want to extend the debate too much longer. But there is one thing that is desperately missing in this place, and perhaps in people speaking from their hearts about perhaps dissatisfaction and so on. We spend an awful lot of time together, but we very rarely communicate with each other. And maybe what I would like to see is a meeting, with its own delegations, of an informal sense that we can get together as colleagues and iron things out before they get to crisis point. Those that have said that the atmosphere for some isn't as happy as it might be, I think speak a measure of truth. That I don't come to work each day with a joyous sense of possibilities. I have found the council in recent months very much Groundhog Day-ish. And I wonder that we couldn't show the maturity to try and get together in a social sense. It can be paid for by ourselves. After a meeting, having a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or something, we never have the opportunity to debrief. So the grievances that perhaps some feel never get resolved, and they just get carried over into the next day, into the next meeting, into the next week. And I wonder that you could show some leadership in terms of trying to create an opportunity in the new year where we can get together and feel part of... People often say, hey, team, or this or that, but I think not all of us feel that we are part of a team, and I, for one, would like to feel part of a team. I wonder that you could give some time and reflection over the Christmas period to how we can be a team and how the governance, because of it, will improve, and that will benefit everyone, especially Aucklanders. So whether, you know, I don't want to suggest anything too specific, because that's your role as mayor, but there must be a better way of doing things, and there must be a better way of improving the relationship between ourselves, because we have such a privilege to be at this table leading Auckland forward, and I'd just like to feel better about the working week, and I'm sure officers would like to feel that as well. So I just put that forward as a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I wasn't going to say anything until I ended up hearing one of the councillors talk about A and B team. And I felt a little offended in regards to A and B, because I can tell you now that the chairs' meetings that we have is solely and wholly, from my perspective, around the agenda items going forward. So if people have that perception around here that there's an A and B team, rest assured that is not the case. And so that's the only reason I'm speaking now, because, Your Worship, in regards to C, I'm glad that C has been put through to next year, because there were some comments I were going to make around the Value for Money Committee, but I will save those until it comes back next year. But I just wanted to sort of let the other councillors know that, you know, I mean, I tell you, for the ones that I talk to, I tell you what we end up discussing, and it's really around the agendas that each of the chairs of the Committee of the Whole has, and I just don't, you know, I don't want to give the impression, because it's not from my perspective around A and B. I mean, I've been a councillor for 14 years, and no way at all, and I've never been part of an A team or a B team, and never will be part of an A team and a B team. I'm just part of, as Councillor Fletcher just sort of mentioned, I'm part of a team of 21 that have the privilege, as she said, and I totally agree with you, Christine, it's a privilege to be around this table, and that's the point I wish to make. So, and yes, I was going to put a Christmas song on just before we left, Your Worship, but I just want to wish everybody around here, and staff included, all the best for Christmas and the New Year. Kia ora.
Merry Christmas. Kia ora. Thanks very much, Councillor. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When Councillor Newman talked about Hamlet, I was reminded, though I didn't do so well in Shakespeare, of what the ghost said, Councillor Newman, when he said, "The hour to return to the horrible flames of purgatory is now upon you." I believe that, just for
It's
a moment.
the pop-up
but
globe here today.
It was prompted when I heard that, Councillor Newman, and I just wanted to prove that I'd read the old Shakespearean play. Sir, I just wanted to comment on when we're talking about, you know, the relationships we have here, and it's my final meeting for the year, and people will know that I've made some public statements that have caused some concern for people. And when I was a public servant, we used to talk a lot about one of the pillars in building a strong public service, and this is going back to the days when I was at the Ministry of Social Development, and I was reminding people at lunch today of the minister I served under who put tennis balls in former students. Anyway, the point, one of the pillars we would build on, and we would have our Māori language as these pillars, was whakawhanaungatanga. And the use and an understanding whakawhanaungatanga, I'm Samoan, so I'm trying my best to perhaps surmise what the meaning is amongst Māori and those who speak the reo much more fluently than I. But it was about how we build strong, resilient, respectful relationships with one another. And I look around this table, I often scab lifts off Councillor Filipaina. Today he picked me up from Manukau. He was very nice to do that. And one of the things I jive, one of the slights I take all the time, and Councillor Filipaina will attest to this, is I always go, "Oh, thank you for picking me up. I feel special that someone from the A team has picked me up." And so he knows it. That's an ongoing joke. And he's expressed today that he doesn't see it like that. And I agree with him. And we're fortunate in that we have enough respect of each other. We've voted differently. I've had people come and say to, "Good grief, the Manukau councillors are voting differently." The point of that is We respect each other enough to be able to disagree in harmony. And I just wanted to remind ourselves of whakawhanaungatanga, of how we build relationships, of taking time out to spend a bit of time chilling with one another. I wanted to offer my colleague, Councillor Hills, a congratulatory note today on being nominated, appointed as Deputy Chair to the Planning Committee. I think that's fantastic. Young, new to the council, first year in council, first term, and taking on this kind of responsibility. There's things in this paper that we should celebrate too. But I think it's all part of how we connect with one another, how we relate to one another. I close on a slight dampener by saying I felt last night when I looked at the paper after the Papatoetoe Christmas parade at about 9:45 last night when I got home and read the paper, and the parade was great, by the way, I was disappointed for Councillor Walker. We might not all agree all the time. And, you know, I jive with him now and then about how we now sometimes need to delineate between questions and speaking. And we have a good laugh. Yeah, we have a good laugh. The point of the matter is there's got to be enough respect for us to say, look, when I'm going to communicate with you, it'll be honest, it'll be timely, and we'll make sure that people's mana is upheld. And if their mana is not upheld, then I think we've failed the test of whakawhanaungatanga. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Very well said.
Thank you very much, Councillor Collins. There being no other speakers, I shall put the vote. I'll take unless there's any requirement to have any of them separately, take the A to D together. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. To the contrary, no.
No. Have my vote recorded against.
And carried. With Councillor Walker's vote recorded against. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of the agenda. It is our last governing body of the year, so if I could just take this occasion on your behalf to thank all our staff for the hard work that they've done on our behalf. We create a lot of that work, and my experience on this council is that we are well served professionally by those who work for us, and sometimes we must try their patience just a little. To all the councillors, I know this has been a pretty demanding year, pretty full year. Can I thank you for your efforts, and can I wish you and your families a peaceful and enjoyable Christmas.
Thank you.
And a happy, safe and prosperous new year. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.
Same to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much.